Hi, I'm the Development and Marketing Director at the Science Zone. My name is Jason DeWitt. I've been watching all my colleagues the last couple weeks come down to the Science Zone and get in front of this camera and talk about super cool sciencey things, and then they get to talk to you about these sciencey things. Then they get to be on the internet. So I thought I would sneak down here to the Science Zone, get in front of the camera myself, and share a little of the stuff I know with you. I don't know that much science, but what I do know are really smart people who know a lot about science. And one of those gentlemen is a guy I met in Toronto last year. He's been in the astronomy field for about 10 years. He's an educator, he's an author, he's been published quite a few times, and he writes about astronomy for a paper in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area. My friend is Ralph Crew. Ralph, why don't you say hello to everyone?
Thanks, Jason. There's a lot of great stuff coming up in the sky in April. And astronomy, I think, is one of those great things you can do on your own in your backyard. It's socially distant. It's okay to do now. And there's wonderful stuff coming up. In fact, tonight, which is April the 7th, there is a super moon, which is when the moon is full during the time when it is also closest to the Earth. At this time, the moon will appear about 14% bigger than it does when it's at its farthest point. So if you're really paying close attention, you actually will see a noticeable increase in both the brightness and the apparent size of the moon in the sky. So that's always fun. And that's something that's, you don't need a telescope to notice a supermoon. It's something that everyone can enjoy. The supermoon, also like all full moons, rises directly at sunset, is up all night long, and then sets right at sunrise. Coming up a little later in the week, for those in the Casper area, on the 8th of April, the International Space Station will actually be visible. It's going to fly over on the 8th. It's going to start in the western sky at about 8:07, and it will pass over. It'll be visible for about 3 minutes, eventually disappearing in the southern sky. And when it does this, it will appear as bright as the brightest stars in the sky. Very easy to pick up. And I always find it inspiring because it's a spaceship. It's got real life people on it. It's in orbit. It's going 17,500 miles per hour, just whipping around the Earth. And what's more inspiring than that, right? It's pretty special. And then later on through the month, we've got a lot of great planets visible, both in the evening and in the morning. In the evening sky, if you look to the west, you can't miss Venus. It's extraordinarily bright, and many times brighter than any of the stars in the sky. Venus is in the west, in between my two favorite open star clusters, which are called the Pleiades and the Hyades. They're both in the constellation of Taurus. And an open star cluster is kind of like a little family of stars. When I say little, I mean like 1,000 members or something like that. So I guess that's bigger than most people's families. But in terms of stars, it's still relatively small, but they're all born from the same cloud of gas, traveling through space together. The Pleiades is probably the most notable of them. It's a very visible cluster of stars. And it's a few 100 million years old, which for stars is brand new. They're babies, and they're all sort of traveling together. Over time, the Milky Way will disperse them all across the sky. But for now, they're still clustered together, and they make a really beautiful telescope target. To the unaided eye, you see about 7 stars in the Pleiades. But with a telescope, you can see hundreds. And it's going to be right next to Venus, and the Hyades is on the other side, a really cool star cluster, sort of bookending the brightest planet in the solar system. And then in the morning, if we look to the east, so right before the sun comes up, right in the same part of the sky that the sun will be rising, you'll see 3 bright planets all in a row. We have the brightest of them, Jupiter, which you can't miss. Jupiter is extraordinarily brilliant. It really, really stands out. And then to the left and a little lower, we see Saturn, and then again left and lower, we see Mars. So Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, all in a row, all wonderful targets for a backyard telescope or even binoculars. In fact, I don't know if you've seen this, but just with binoculars, you can see 4 moons of Jupiter if you have them on a very steady surface and you get a nice clear look, which just blows my mind. That's so awesome. And the moon, which was super just a week earlier, will pass right by all 3 of them over the mornings of the 14th, 15th, and 16th. It'll be really, really close to all of them. And that, I think, is pretty special, too. There's something about seeing 4 of the brightest, most significant objects in the solar system all in the same part of the sky. It helps give you a sense of the sort of the shape, the layout, and the scope of our solar system. It makes it 3-dimensional. It makes it real. and that's really satisfying.
Thanks again, Ralph. This is all incredible stuff, and I look forward to doing it tonight and for many nights to come in April and further on into the spring and summer. But I'm not an astronomer. I'm not even an amateur one. What can you tell me about what kind of telescope to use? How powerful should it be? Can we use binoculars, which I think I heard you say earlier? But also, what time do I go out and set up my telescope? Which direction do I point that telescope? Anything you can share on that sort of thing?
It all depends on what you want to look at. I mean, any time that you can see the night sky is a good time to go out and do stargazing. Binoculars, I think, are the most underrated tool. One of my favorite things to do is just take binoculars and scan around the sky without any particular idea of where I should look. I just look around for stuff, see what you can find. You can see star clusters, you can see faint bits of nebulas, or nebulae, as if you want to get technical with it, right? If you want to get a little bit more specific, if there are targets that you really want to get, my favorites for this time of year, of course, the star clusters of the Hyades and the Pleiades are beautiful targets, and you can do those right after sunset. They're pretty bright. Once the sun goes down a little more, but still early-ish in the evening, I can't recommend the Orion Nebula enough, even with a small backyard telescope. The Orion Nebula, which is an enormous star-forming region of gas and dust about 1,300 light years away, which means that when you see it, the light you're seeing left that nebula in the year 700 or 720, I guess, which still, that always blows my mind too, right? But this is an object that's hundreds of light years wide. It's very large. The stars in the very center make a little trapezoid. They're called the trapezium. They're very young. They're emitting an enormous amount of energy, and the gas around them is excited by this energy. It actually glows. It emits its own light like a light bulb. Because of this, the Orion Nebula is known as an emission nebula, and it is in fact the brightest emission nebula in the entire night sky. So if you're interested in you just have a small telescope and you want to sort of get your feet wet at looking at beyond just our solar system, but farther out, deep sky objects, the Orion Nebula is as good as it gets for that. And then if you want to stay a little closer to home and you're willing to get up early, nothing's better than Saturn through a telescope. If you haven't, you need to go see it. The rings of Saturn are majestic. They're very visible. They're bright. Even with a small backyard telescope, you can see it. And many astronomers credit looking at Saturn through a telescope as being the little nugget of inspiration that kicked them off into a lifetime of scientific pursuit. And it definitely has had that effect on me. I've been able to give that to thousands of people through telescopes over the years, and well, it's really, really special.
I don't know what to say, Ralph. I couldn't possibly have said it any better myself. Wouldn't even try, actually.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really lucky to have friends as smart as Ralph, and I have a few more, so next time I sneak down here to the Science Zone to get in front of this camera, we'll have other smart people that are going to tell you about super cool science things. Until then, see you next time.